Okay, I want to just pick up a few of those points about language, because I think phrases like climate deniers, which is been quite a prevalent one, and flat earthers have absolutely no part in the debate whatsoever. And although I have heard, and we've all heard, politicians and what you might call leaders of science, people in the scientific establishment saying the debate is over. If you talk to climate scientists themselves, they will say that although most of them will say that although they are they think the balance of evidence is that human activities are changing the climate, that there are still many uncertainties. But firstly about the past climate record, some about the current climate record, and also particularly about how far the climate will change in the future. And most climate scientists will say that government ministers have a much more simplistic view. So I think this goes again to the complexity of the debate. And when they say it's settled, what they mean is maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing what they mean is it's settled enough for us to think that we need to take some action. But when people say it's settled, they mean many, many different things. And to give you an example of the difficulty of understanding all this, I was at a meeting of the Royal Society last year with eminent professors from around the world, the sort of people we regard as experts in climate change because they write papers in the big journals, Nature and Science. And I have to say there are very few skeptic journals in those, skeptic papers in those journals. And one of the professors stood up and asked a question, a scientific question, the answer to which that I knew. And I'm a policy specialist, not a science specialist. I was a little alarmed that I knew this question, which was outside his normal realm of science, and I just happened to have picked up on. So I asked the members of the panel at the Royal Society, would it be a good idea if there was some some professors of general scientific knowledge in terms of climate change, instead of people specialising in some microcosm of tiny, tiny fragmented interest. And I was savaged by the panel, who said it was a ridiculous idea and you had to be a top person in a very narrow field to get credibility from other scientists. Now, on the other hand, Richard has talked about, and here, I fully support his view, there are some people on the blogosphere who have made themselves experts in general climate science. And we have to find some way, the IPCC or whatever replaces it has to find some way of giving credibility to their expertise, as well as to the expertise of people who've gone through the Royal Societies of various kinds. I think this whole thing has opened up a huge challenge to the way science is conducted,
and
not just in climate science, but across the board.
I've read quotes of this is of immense significance to the future of the way science is reported and the way that the climate change arguments are handled. Could this actually be a seminal moment, do you think?
I think we're at a really big moment, and it's really partly to do with a broader change of how we all cope with the internet. So, for instance, I've just been at the inquiry, launched the inquiry, the Sir Muir-Russell inquiry, and one of the questions I asked was, you are funded by the UEA, you say you're completely independent, and maybe nobody in this room disbelieves you, but if people outside see that the inquiry is funded by the UEA, they'll say, oh yeah, funded by the UEA, research funded by ExxonMobil, research funded by WWF, and immediately dismiss it. And I asked Samir if he'd thought about, before accepting the funding from the UEA, if he'd thought about seeking independent funding. And he said he hadn't thought about it. So we have an establishment behaving in a normal way, as if the internet isn't going to shout back at them, and without thinking that actually they're dealing with everything they do with a broad global public in a way which is inconceivable to them when they started their careers, or indeed when I started my career. This is all going to make me behave differently in my own journalism. It's a fundamental challenge to us all. I think we're at a really interesting moment.
Thank you very much, Roger Harrison, who's the BBC's environment analyst. We were talking, of course, about the row about the leaked climate change emails, and the inquiry has been launched into that today. It's expected to take a few months.